Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Clayton County Library System virtual program. Today, we've partnered with the Georgia Department of Agriculture Cottage Food Program. Our library recognizes that financial hardship has touched far too many people during this pandemic that we've been experiencing. And so we wanted to have a presentation that would give you the option to earn some money right from your own home. And to assist us with this presentation is Mr. Chris Paisley from the Cottage Food Program. Mr. Paisley?
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. If you give me just a second, I'll pull up my PowerPoint. I'm going to give a brief overview of the Georgia Department of Agriculture's Retail Food Program's Cottage Food License. But first, I wanted to kind of give you a quick overview of what the actual Georgia Department of Agriculture does. So the Georgia Department of Agriculture is responsible for regulating and inspecting food for human consumption for sale at retail, which means to the end consumer. So you produce something, you sell it to me, I take it home and either consume it myself or feed my family with it. That's the definition of a retail food transaction in the state of Georgia. We operate in all 159 counties of the state of Georgia. Currently, as of this morning, we have 18,024 licensed establishments. These establishments range from retail grocery stores like Kroger and Walmart and Whole Foods, and Sprouts, Fresh Market, convenience stores, Quick Trip, Racetrack, Shells, retail bakeries, meat markets, seafood markets, the cottage food industry, as well as roadside produce stands. As of this morning, we had 398 pending establishments. And a pending establishment is an establishment that has filed their paperwork. They've had an establishment number generated, and they are pending. A licensing inspection to get started. So we have a total of 18,422 total establishments. Based on our staffing, that works out to 449 average establishments per compliance specialist, or what is referred to in the industry as a retail food inspector. The 159 counties are broken up into 3 districts. We have a North District, a Metro District, and a South District. And each of those districts is staffed by a district manager and a district administrative assistant. So essentially, when paperwork is submitted to the Atlanta office or to me directly, it is then farmed out to one of the district admins. They collect all the required data, input the information into our digital health department system, and generate the establishment number. And then they become the liaison between the operator and the inspector to facilitate the inspection and the licensing of the establishment. We also have a special processes consultant. His name is Benjamin Pitt. And what a process consultant does is he deals with anything that is not defined in the FDA Model Food Code, which is what the rules of the Georgia Department of Agriculture are written on, using it as a resource guidance. And so things that would be considered a special process and none of these qualify for the cottage food license anyway, but just to give you a quick overview, is anything that is outside of the requirements of the FDA Model Food Code. So fermentation, whether it's chow chow, sauerkraut, kombucha, kimchi, reduced oxygen packaging, dehydration, making jerky, making sausage, things of that nature. Raw unpasteurized juice is also a special process. And each of those processes involves having an approved variance granted through the department, as well as having a HACCP plan developed by the operator and approved by the department. At full staffing, we would have 41 retail compliance specialists or inspectors. So you think about that, 159 counties, just shy of 19,000 establishments, and we have 41 folks to regulate those facilities. We currently have 4 open positions. We had 27% turnover last year. COVID, the pandemic, prodded a lot of our veteran inspectors to retire and spend that time with their family, especially if they had any kind of pre-existing health conditions. So we lost about 12 people last year. and are in the process of restaffing and getting back to full strength. We currently have 17 standardized compliance specialists, and standardization for our inspectors is a process that they go through with an FDA retail food specialist, where they are trained on the standardized way to inspect a food facility so that all of our inspections are consistent. We're required by the constraints of our grant to have 80% of our staff standardized. We were at 80% pre-COVID, but one of the first impacts to the Department of Agriculture of the COVID-19 pandemic was an inability to not be put in the field anymore. So not only did the FDA stop the standardization process for our trainers, but we in turn stopped because we couldn't get out into the facilities to standardize the trainers, and we weren't allowing any face-to-face contact interagency as well as out in the public for about 3.5 months during the opening portion of the pandemic. We have 9 field supervisors. Those are essentially veteran retail inspectors who are in charge of 4 to 5 direct reports each, and they aid in their training and development, and are just kind of a subject matter or expert or a mentor for those individuals. And then we have 2 standardized trainers, and these are folks that are individually standardized by the FDA representatives, and they do in turn do all of our training. That's just kind of a brief overview of what the Department of Agriculture does from a retail food standpoint. In the Department of Agriculture, we have several different departments and divisions. In the food safety division, we have a dairy program. We have a farm safety, or what's called a produce safety team. We have a manufactured food team and a program that regulates all the food manufacturers like Coca-Cola and Hostess and Mrs. Smith's Bakery, and do all of that. And then we have a pretty strong support staff of administrators as well. So let's go ahead and start talking about the cottage food program. So cottage food sales are allowed under Georgia Regulations, Chapter 40-7-19. Licensed cottage food operators can only make non-potentially hazardous foods. And then I'll show you some examples of non-potentially hazardous foods. But the best way to determine whether it is a non-potentially hazardous food is very simply this. If it requires refrigeration, it cannot be produced in under a cottage food license in a domestic kitchen and sold at retail. Or if it requires hot holding, for instance, meals or hot barbecue plates or things of that nature that would require by the food code to be held at a minimum temperature of 135 degrees Fahrenheit. So those cannot be produced under a cottage food license. And some of the things that get into those gray areas that you have to be very diligent about are things that require refrigeration that you wouldn't normally think of. For instance, red velvet cake with a homemade cream cheese frosting. 90% of the population leaves that cake out on their counter and eats it. But in relation to the FDA model food code, that cream cheese requires refrigeration because it didn't go through a kill step. So it's a very simple process of making sure that if you are using refrigerated products, butter, eggs, dairy, of any nature, that can all be combined and used as long as there's a kill step in there, and that is traditionally the cooking. So things that you can't produce under a cottage food license: red velvet cakes with homemade cream cheese frosting, banana pudding, cheesecakes of any kind, cannolis with a ricotta cheese filling. So you just need to understand that if it requires refrigeration, it can't be produced under a cottage food license in your domestic kitchen. Cottage foods can also they can only be sold at retail, and they can only be sold one of 4 or 5 ways: at farmers markets, fairs, festivals, community events, and online only in the state of Georgia. Cottage food produced items cannot be sold across state lines, whether it's in-person sales or whether it's via the internet and third-party shipping. They cannot cross state lines. They also cannot be wholesaled. And what I mean by wholesaled is you can't produce a product in your domestic kitchen and then sell it to Kroger for them in turn to sell it to their customer. That's wholesaling. So by definition, a retail sale is to the end consumer. And by end consumer, we mean the person who is going to consume that product or feed their family with that product. And the reason that they can't be wholesaled or sold across state lines is because the cottage food license only requires an opening inspection, or what we call a pre-licensing inspection. Once we've completed that and given you the authority to start your production of your items and selling your items, we will never, ever come back into your home and re-inspect your kitchen unless there is a foodborne illness or outbreak tied to either a product you are producing or a product that you had produced. So that tends to make that process, anything coming from a cottage food producer is what's called an unapproved source if it was to get out into the retail environment. Cottage food operators must complete an American National Standards Institute, or ANSI, we like our acronyms in the government, accredited food safety training program. And there are typically different levels of training that you can take in these. All that is required to satisfy the cottage food regulations is the food handlers course. It's a $15 course. It takes about an hour to complete the course material and the training, the test, the assessment at the end of that. And it is much different than the certified food manager courses. And the only reason that we even put that what's called a CFPM, Certified Food Protection Manager requirement in there is we have a lot of cottage food operators that just want to test the marketplace and see if their product, if there's a market for their product. You know, everybody thinks that they have the best recipe handed down through their family for generations, but you never really know until you get it out there into the marketplace and see if there's a market for it. So we'll have a lot of folks that will start out as cottage food operators, and then if their product does well, they'll transition to a food sales establishment license, which allows them then not only to sell across state lines, but to have a wholesaling component where they can take that best red velvet, cake that they make and sell it to grocers who then can sell it to their customers. So a lot of folks will go in and take that certified food protection manager course right off the start to save them some money in preparation for expanding their business down the road. But again, just note that it only takes the food handler's certificate to satisfy the cottage food regulations. And another process is so there are three things involved in applying for a license. Number one is filling out a completed cottage food license, and I'll show you a picture of that here in a few minutes. You have to provide a verification of lawful presence, which is an affidavit that you print off and fill out, and you have a notary notarize it. They verify you have a legal right to be in the United States, whether you're a resident, whether you've got a green card, whether you're on a visa. They verify that, they notarize the document, you provide us with that, as well as a copy of the ID that you used for that document. And then you also have to have a copy of your most recent water bill if you are on a public water source. So here are the steps that you should, if you're interested in starting a cottage food business, there's a few required steps. The first step is to contact your local city or county planning and zoning office to make sure that there are no ordinances that would stop you from operating a home-based business. And this fluctuates greatly throughout the state of Georgia based on the area, and in highly metro areas like Fulton County, in most cases, won't allow home-based businesses. As you get out into the suburbs, it is more consistent. And then you get into the rural areas, there are no local city or county jurisdictions requirements that would not allow you to have it. So you need to make sure that you check with your local city or county planning and zoning offices before you start the process. The next step depends on your water or sewage source. So there are two different requirements in our regulations. If you're on a public water source, which means you are hooked to the city or county water and the city or county sewer system, it's just as simple as checking with your local Department of Public Health to make sure that your let me rephrase that. If you're on a sewer system, there's no requirements for that. You just need to provide us with a copy of your water bill. Now, on the other hand, if you are in the country or in the suburbs, or you are on a private water source or a septic tank, at that point, it's twofold. Number one, you would need to talk with your local Department of Public Health and make sure that your septic system can handle the new increased waste from whatever items you're going to be producing. Traditionally, if you have a 3 to 4 room residence, your septic tank will be large enough, but the Department of Public Health regulates, licenses, and approves all septic systems within the state of Georgia. So we're kind of codependent on the Department of Public Health to facilitate some of these processes. And then if you are on a private water source, so a private well, a community well, at that point, you are required to have your water tested for coliform and fecal coliform. And all of your local Department of Public Health offices, and there are 18 district offices throughout the state, they test water and provide you with the results for that. I believe it's a $100 fee. We used to do it, but our labs are so far away and our courier system wasn't allowing us to get the samples in on time to get them tested, because from the time the water sample is pulled until it has to be tested, there's a 30-hour time frame. If you go over 30 hours and 1 minute, that sample is no longer valid because some of the things that live in that water cease to exist after 30 hours. So that's why we went away as a department from collecting water samples and having them tested at our labs, and it's now on the operator to take care of that process, working with their local Department of Public Health. Let's see here. So we've got all the septic and everything there. A cottage food license application form is available on the GDA website or via fax, mail, or email. Prior to licensing, a notarized affidavit and proof of U.S. citizenship is required. The annual $100 license fee is due January 1st. Cottage food operators applying after June 30th only pay $50. All products the cottage food operator intends to produce must be listed on the application form. These products are then listed on the cottage food license issued to the operator. If you decide to change your operations down the road, you have to apply for a new application to make sure that you cover it. So it's very imperative that when you're going through that cottage food license application, you mark every one of the categories that you wish to produce, because that will save you another licensing fee down the road. It's always kind of a best practice to err on the just go for it all. And if you only end up making half of it, you're still covered and you don't have to worry about it. Our licensing cycle, or our billing cycle for the cottage food license, is different than our other licenses. They run from July 1st through June 30th annually. The cottage food is a full calendar year, so it's January 1st through December 31st annually. Traditionally, 2 to 3 weeks after the first of the year, you'll receive an email from our licensing division with a link to renew your license. If you don't want to renew your license, it's on you to contact the department so that we can place you out of business. And if you do end your business, 6 months into the year, there's no refund on the licensing fee, and that's one of the biggest questions that we get. If I cancel my license, do I get the $50 back from it only being operating for a half a year? So just know that once we have that money, it doesn't come back to you. The department will perform a one-time pre-operational inspection after processing the cottage food license application, which ensures the operator can meet the requirements of the regulation. After the pre-operational inspection, the department only performs additional inspections as needed due to a change in operation or adding or changing of products, or to investigate consumer complaints and potential foodborne illness outbreaks. And then I'll give you some best practices for some safety and hygiene later. But that is one of the biggest misconceptions, is that all of our other licensed facilities, we visit them on certain incremental timeframes. For instance, if it's a mobile vehicle license and they're selling fresh or frozen meat, seafood, or poultry, we inspect those facilities every 6 months. Your grocery stores and your convenience stores, they're on a 12-month inspection frequency. And then we have other inspection frequencies of 18 months and 24 months. And those inspection frequencies are designated in the tiers, and the tiers are assigned. Tiers determine your licensing fee. Our basic license starts at $100. Our most expensive license is at $300. So the more processes that you have, the higher your tier is. And that's why the cottage food license is a tier 1, $100 licensing fee, because again, you're producing non-potentially hazardous, non-TCS food. And TCS stands for time and temperature controlled for safety, essentially meaning in layman's terms, it cannot require refrigeration. So this is what the license application looks like. It's online. You click a link, you can fill it out right then. You hit save and submit, and it automatically sends that license to our licensing division. So it's a real neat upgrade for our system. But here are the things that you need to have completed before you submit your licensing application. And I want to caution you on this because here's one of the biggest gaps we have in our customer service. And I will tell you that the retail food program prides itself on exceptional levels of customer service. We are known not only throughout our agency, but throughout our sister agencies as a top level customer service team. And each and every member of our team takes pride in facilitating customer service as quickly and as possible. But if you don't submit all of the required paperwork, you will get an email from one of the district administrative assistants, and 9 times out of 10, that email ends up in your junk or spam folder of your email, and then you don't hear from us for 3 or 4 weeks because we're still waiting on information that you don't know we need. So that's really why I want to stress the importance of turning in all of your documentation at the same time. So again, you need a completed cottage food license application, a notarized verification of lawful presence. It's an affidavit you print out off our website. You take it to a notary and they verify you are who you are, watch you sign it, take a copy of your ID, and then they notarize the document. You need to provide us with a copy of the state or federally issued ID used to secure the affidavit, a copy of your completed food handlers course completion certificate, a copy of your most recent water bill if on a public water source, and your water testing results if on a private water source. And again, you're testing for coliform and fecal coliform on your water. So some of the approved products that can be produced under a cottage food license: loaf breads, rolls, biscuits, cakes, except those that require refrigeration due to cream cheese icing, filling, or high moisture content, such as tres leches. Pastries and cookies, candies and confections, fruit pies, jams, jellies, preserves, not to include fruit butters. Fruit butters do not have the proper mixture of sugar and pectin levels that will make them a safe product. They have to be produced under a food sales establishment license in a licensed commercial or shared time kitchen, and they also have, that recipe has to be approved by a processing authority like the one at the UGA's Food Science Extension up in Athens. Dried fruits, dry herbs, seasonings and mixtures, cereal, trail mixes and granola, coated or uncoated nuts, vinegar and flavored vinegars. And I want to expand on that point. A lot of folks try to produce hot sauces under a cottage food license because in their mind that's a flavored vinegar, but it's not, because the minute you chop that pepper or grind that pepper to make that hot sauce, you've now taken something that wasn't time and temperature controlled for safety, and you've made it time and temperature controlled for safety. For instance, a tomato is the prime example of a vegetable, or fruit in this case, that does not require refrigeration until the minute you put a knife into it and cut it, and then by FDA standards, it has now become a TCS food and requires refrigeration. Cucumbers are the same way. There's a whole list of items that can't be done. So hot sauces have to be manufactured in a food sale under a food sales establishment license in a commercial or shared time kitchen that is also licensed by the Department of Agriculture. And again, they have to be verified by a processing authority, and you have to provide us with the processing authority letter that process and that product is safe, whether it's a shelf stable product or whether you're making a refrigerated product. And then last but not least, popcorn balls, and cotton candy. Some of the things that are not approved: meat, any kind of protein, poultry, chicken, turkey, duck, pork, lamb, shellfish and crustaceans, eggs, milk and dairy products, cooked plant-based foods, rice, beans, and vegetables, baked potatoes, mushrooms, raw sprouts, tofu and soy protein foods, and untreated garlic and oil mixtures. So the pre-licensing inspection, you heard me talk about that earlier, and that gets a lot of people really concerned that we're going to come into their home and we're going to do an inspection, and we don't really have a checklist on what we're looking for. So I want to just verify that a cottage food license allows you to use your domestic kitchen. And your domestic kitchen is defined as the kitchen that you cook for and provide for your family meals on. So you can't have any commercial equipment in there. Now there are cases where if you have a Viking, a Viking stove and a Viking refrigerator, or a Wolf refrigerator or a Wolf stove, those are commercial grade appliances that a lot of people put in their houses, so they're okay. But what we're talking about is stand mixers and industrial coffee roasters, and giant Hobart mixers and bandsaws and all these other things that you would find in a restaurant or in a grocery store for the production of food for human consumption. So we will conduct an inspection at the home for each cottage food license issued. Now, in the past, these inspections were done in person, and because of the nature of entering an individual's home, we would send 2 inspectors as a best practice for their protection and for your protection, because we're entering a private residence, and that's uncomfortable for us, and it was uncomfortable for the homeowners as well. One of the few benefits that we realized from COVID is that because of the nature of products that are being produced in regards to non-TCS, non-potentially hazardous food, we could conduct these cottage food licensing inspections over the phone via FaceTime, WhatsApp, Zoom, Microsoft Teams. In some cases, when folks don't have the proper data package, or they don't have those apps, or there's a cultural or a language barrier, we can just they can send us pictures of, we can tell them, here's a list of what we're looking for. We want to see your storage. We want to see the storage in your refrigerator. We want to see the exterior walls of your home, pictures of your kitchen, of your stove, and all the equipment you're using. And then we can just do it that way. So instead of taking 2 inspectors now, it just takes 1 inspector. Instead of having to enter somebody's home, we can do it all virtually, which puts everyone else at ease. And the real benefit of that is during the COVID pandemic, especially the first 6 to 9 months, we saw a 368% increase in cottage food license applications, primarily due to the shutdown of restaurants and the impact of the food supply chain, and the creation of even greater food deserts especially in and around Metro Atlanta. And so we had to go above and beyond and go outside of the box to facilitate that growth and get those inspections done. And since we weren't out in the field, this was the natural progression, and it's worked so well. And the feedback from the public has been so overwhelming that we will continue this practice indefinitely with the cottage food inspections. So we inspect the home prior to issuing the cottage food license for the investigation of a complaint, or if there is a foodborne illness or outbreak associated with either your house or any of the products that you produce. All those inspections are announced, with the exception of for a foodborne illness or outbreak. And then the most we'll give you is an hour. We're going to show up at your home at some point very quickly after that complaint's done, and we're going to ask to inspect the facility again and any product that you may still have on hand. Okay, so just things to really worry, to expect when you're getting your inspection. Please understand that only the cottage food products disclosed on the registration form can be produced. So for instance, if you apply for a cottage food license and you decide down the road you're going to do cheesecakes under it and just get one by us, when that comes to light, then you're now in violation of your license. And we do have the authority to revoke licenses based on the commissioner's feedback once we've conducted an investigation. You're also subject to fines and probation if you violate the agreements of that license. So it's very important, again, that you put down all products that you're going to produce. And if you make a change to that, you contact your inspector so that they can update that. Only standard residential non-commercial kitchen equipment is being utilized in the manufacture of the cottage food products. We verify that the home kitchen equipment is acceptable for the intended products. For instance, we will open your refrigerator and we will actually take ambient temperature readings to make sure that your refrigerator is able to maintain all refrigerated ingredients or finished products at 41 degrees Fahrenheit or lower. We will actually turn on your oven. Now you do it virtually, but we would turn on your oven and we'll put a thermometer in there to make sure that it can reach 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is the kill limit for most bacteria that we're looking for. The food contact surfaces and utensils are smooth and easily cleanable. And this is something to pay close attention to. So our regulations require that all food prep and production surfaces are smooth and easily cleanable. So I'll give you some examples of what you can have in your kitchen and what you can't have in your kitchen. Concrete floors are bad because they're porous and they absorb liquids. And that creates an environment for microbial and biological growth. Polished and sealed concrete is fantastic. Ceramic tile, porcelain tile, vinyl flooring is perfectly acceptable. Shag carpet in your kitchen would exempt you from being able to get a license because obviously shag carpet is not sanitary. So no carpet in your kitchen. On your walls, we're looking for smooth and smoothly painted. Drywall is fine. RFP, which is fiberglass reinforced plastic. Stainless steel, ceramic backsplashes, tile backsplashes of that nature. Your ceilings are pretty wide open. Painted drywall is perfectly acceptable. The two things that you can't have in your ceiling of your kitchen is popcorn ceiling and heavily textured ceiling. So if you have the heavy textured ceiling with the swirl patterns or star patterns in it, and that continues into your kitchen, you're going to have to correct that before you can be issued a cottage food license. And the reason being is that popcorn ceiling and that heavy textured ceiling, in addition to being porous and absorbent, which means it takes on liquid and creates that environment, it also chips, peels, cracks, and becomes physical contaminants in the product that you're producing. So that's something to look for when you're getting ready to apply for a cottage food license. And then we look to verify that the permitted area is free from the presence of rodents, insects, and that there are no points of entry visible prior to starting operations. So we will actually walk the exterior of your home or have you walk it and video it for us. And we're looking for gaps in doors, broken windows, missing windows, doors that don't seal properly, any place that insects or rodents can access your home, especially your kitchen. We're going to verify that those are the structural integrity of those before we issue you a license. So that's another thing to look at as you're evaluating your kitchen and the space surrounding your kitchen in order to apply for a cottage food license. That facilities are available to properly store ingredients and finished products according to the regulations in 40-7-1. And here's what it's really important to understand. We are not requiring that you have a separate pantry to store your dry ingredients, nor a separate refrigerator to store your wet ingredients and your finished product. But we do require that you have a designated shelf in your pantry and a designated shelf in your refrigerator for your ingredients, both wet and dry, and your finished product. The intent here is not to allow your teenager to come in and grab the gallon of milk out of the fridge and take 4 or 5 swigs out of the gallon of milk and put the lid back on and put that milk back in the refrigerator, and you come home 2 hours later and make a cake out of it. So there has to be separation of ingredients from what your family's consuming and what you're using to produce your cottage food products. We're going to verify that we've given you a copy of the food safety directives and that you understand them, and we'll go over those a little bit later. That you are aware of the labeling requirements for cottage food products, including allergen declaration and the cottage food statement, and that you have a scale, a certified food scale, if you are selling your products by weight. And we'll go over a couple of these a little bit more in depth. So here are the food safety directives, and I'm not going to read them line by line because I'm going to provide you with the deck and you can go over them, but it revolves around hand washing, and there's just some points here on proper hand washing. Talks about unauthorized people in the cottage food area. At the time that you're producing your cottage food goods, nobody can be in the kitchen but you, or if you employ an employee, can be in the kitchen when you're producing it. So your kids can't sit around the island doing their homework while you're making cakes to sell at retail. That you have your food contact surfaces and all equipment and utensils should be cleaned to sight and touch before beginning manufacture of cottage food products, and at a minimum frequency while in use to limit the potential for food and food ingredient contamination. So what that's saying is you need to wash, rinse, and sanitize your utensils that you're using a minimum of every 4 hours. And the cottage food regulations allow you to use your dishwasher to do that, or even a sink with hot soapy water and a good thorough rinse. Under a food sales establishment license, that requires a 3-compartment sink, and you have to be able to wash, rinse, sanitize, and air dry all of your vessels and equipment and utensils that you would be using. We're going to look for, it talks about proper storage of ingredients and finished product, including separate shelves in your pantry and your refrigerator. So now I want to go through some of the frequently asked questions about cottage food. Is there a limit to how much I can sell as a cottage food producer? The Department of Agriculture puts no limits on your gross sales or gross units that you can sell. Again, we've already talked about this several times, non-potentially hazardous foods that do not require time and or temperature control for safety, so no refrigeration. No beef, chicken, pork, lamb. Again, if it requires refrigeration, it's out. We talked about the need to go through your local zoning and planning office to ensure that you can have a cottage food business there. We've already talked a couple times about utilizing commercial equipment. So again, the domestic kitchen is defined as your residential kitchen that you cook for your family and you prepare your family meals out of. That's the same kitchen that you have to use to produce your cottage food products. Does my equipment, stove, and or refrigerator need to be NSF certified? No, it does not. So there are 2 certification bodies that certify kitchen and restaurant equipment for production of food, and that is NSF and ANSI. They both have logos that they put on product that they verified meet the minimum standards for food prep and production. That is required under a food sales establishment license, but not under a cottage food license, because again, you are allowed to use your domestic kitchen to produce those products. Do I need to have a DBA? DBA stands for doing business as. So for instance, if I've got Grumpy's Getaway LLC as my business, but I'm going to make Grumpy's Golden granola and sell it, and that's what I want it to be, I would apply for a doing business as, and my business name under my Grumpy's Getaway would be Grumpy's granola. Now there are some city and county requirements that dictate that you have to have a DBA filed with them. So that's again why it's imperative that you call your local city planning and zoning county. One thing to mention is, in addition to your Georgia Department of Agriculture cottage food license, you are also required to get either a local city or county business license. And that's how they collect their cut of the pie out of your profits. Georgia Department of Agriculture cottage food produced items are exempt from Georgia state tax, but they are subject to local city and county taxes. So that's why you're required to have a business license through the city or county, and they will not issue that to you until you have our license. And that is a stipulation in law, actually, in the state of Georgia. So just make sure that you're aware of that. Here's another thing that comes up as well. Many of you, when you're producing your cottage food things, you're going to want to take them out to local farmers markets or community fairs or events that are on the weekend. And those farmers markets are not regulated by the Department of Agriculture. They're usually community groups. Some of them are even nonprofits. They have the ability to make their own rules, and the rules and regulations of the Georgia Department of Agriculture don't circumvent them or override them. So case in point, there's farmers markets that require you to have a food sales establishment license in addition to the cottage food license. Now, the cottage food license allows you to legally produce your products in your domestic kitchen, and the food sales establishment license is something that each individual farmers market has the right, and many of them do require you to have. So unfortunately, those farmers markets are going to cost you an extra $100 annually to get a tier 1 food sales establishment license to be able to sell at those markets. So do your research when you're looking at going to farmers markets, and if If they do require that additional license, then you've got a decision to make whether you want to go through that extra added expense and that process again of applying for a license, a whole different license altogether, and having that additional expense to sell your product at their farm or market. So just something to be aware of. Are there any special requirements regarding my home on-site well? Yes, only potable water from a properly constructed on-site well or municipal water system can be used. If a well is used, the well water should be tested at least annually for coliform bacteria and fecal coliform. Water from wells with any of the following features should be avoided: shallow depths, less than 25 feet, producing cloudy water, located in below ground pit, buried wellhead, missing a cap or a seal, opening around case pipes, located in close proximity to a septic system or a hand dug well. And again, your local county health department can provide consultation on drinking water quality and well construction if you're in that position. Are there any concerns related to my home on-site wastewater or my septic system? And that all depends on the nature and volume of the food products which will be manufactured for sale. So once you reach out to your local city and county planning office and zoning office, and you find out that it's okay to do this, your next call needs to be to the Department of Public Health local office and ask for an evaluation of your septic system if you're on a septic system. And they'll tell you how big it is and what it can handle, and you show them your product list and they'll tell you yay or nay whether you can produce those products at any kind of volume without risk to your septic system. Why are some products not allowed to be made or sold under cottage food law? Pretty much we've covered this. We've kind of beat this one to death. But again, if it's what's considered a potentially hazardous product or a TCS, time and temperature controlled for safety product, it can't be produced under that because there is a high likelihood that those products produced in a domestic kitchen environment have a higher potential to cause foodborne illness and outbreaks. Another one we get, are pet trees included under the cottage food law? No. Cottage food guidance documents apply to human grade food only. If you're looking to do pet treats out of your home, you have to apply through our agriculture inputs department. We have a pet feed program that regulates and licenses all folks producing food for pet consumption. Can I produce and sell cooked vegetable products like salsa, tomato sauces, spaghetti sauces, or focaccia bread with roasted vegetables? No. Anything made with a cooked vegetable or whatnot is going to require refrigeration. So that's just something to be aware of. We've already talked about apple butter and fruit butters. They can't be produced as well. Another one that we get questions about is apple cider or apple juice. It cannot be produced again because once that apple is pressed, it becomes a TCS product and has to be maintained at 41 degrees Fahrenheit or below. Here's something to be really aware of as well. So this question comes to us all the time. I lease space in a retail building where I operate a small antique shop. As a cottage food operator, can I sell my own baked goods from my shop under the cottage food regulations? Yes, as long as you are the owner or the leasee of the antique shop, you can produce your cottage food products in your domestic kitchen and bring them to the shop that you either own or lease and sell them. And that is not considered wholesaling because you are the sole owner of both licenses and the chain of custody of that food product is intact. So you wouldn't be violating any wholesaling restrictions by doing that. Cottage food labeling guidelines. The biggest question we get is, do I have to put a label on my cottage food? And yes, you're required to label your cottage food, and there's basic information that has to be on each of those labels. So it's imperative before you schedule your inspection with your inspector that you have at least a mock-up of what your label is going to look like. And I'm going to provide you the resource documents at the end of this that actually go through what has to be on a label, how it has to be on the label, including font and font size, because they're very specific in regards to the Code of Federal Regulations labeling guidance that the FDA has adopted. So name and address of the cottage food operation. We get a lot of folks that say, I don't want to put my home address on the label. Can I get a P.O. box? No, not by law. The name and address of the cottage food operation has to be on the label. And that is for a multitude of purposes. It's for consumer complaints. It's for traceback if there's ever a foodborne illness or outbreak. It's so the purchasee of the product can get a hold of you if there's a problem with it. And it is required by law. Common name or description of the cottage food products, the ingredients of the cottage food product in descending order of predominance by weight. And what that means is if you're making a cake, your number one volume item is going to be flour. So you would say all-purpose flour would be your first one. Then you would have your sugar and cocoa powder in descending order. So your most predominant to the least predominant is listed in that ingredient table. You need to have the net weight or net volume of what you're producing on the label. So for instance, if you're making cupcakes, you're not going to want to make a label for each cupcake. You're going to want to be able to, that's it, because cupcakes vary in weight. You're going to have some that are 10 ounces, some that are 12 ounces. So if you're making a label for cupcakes, it's best to err on the high side and say that each of them weighs, 12 ounces. And if they come in and over that, you're not going to get in trouble. Now, if you say they're going to be 16 ounces and they come in at 12, then that's against the law. So just be very diligent about that. Allergen labeling is required as specified in federal labeling requirements. And then the following statement must be on all cottage food produced items made in a cottage food operation that is not subject to state food safety inspections, all in capital letters. And again, it tells you what fonts you can use for that. And then again, the little disclaimer at the bottom is, again, the home address where it was produced does have to be on that product. So what does allergen labeling as specified in federal labeling requirements means? It means you must identify if any of your ingredients or that ingredient's sub-ingredients are made from one of the following food groups: milk, eggs, wheat, peanuts, soybeans, fish, including shellfish, crab, lobster, or shrimp, and tree nuts, such as almonds, pecans, or walnuts. For example, if you have an ingredient made with a wheat-based product, you have two options. Option number one, your label would include the allergen in the ingredient list. For example, a white bread with the following ingredients list: whole wheat flour, water, salt, and yeast. Ingredients: whole wheat flour. This is what your label would say under ingredients: whole wheat flour, water, salt, and yeast. In this example, listing whole wheat flour as an ingredient meets the requirements of federal law. And then option number two, include an allergen statement contains after the ingredient list. For example, a white bread with the following ingredient list: whole wheat flour, water, sodium caseinate, salt, and yeast. Your ingredients would read as this: whole wheat flour, water, sodium caseinate, salt, and yeast. Contains wheat and milk. The contain statement must reflect all of the allergens found in the product. In this example, the milk comes from the sodium caseinate. And then here's just the required labeling of all tree nuts for allergens. It has to be on there. For instance, if your ingredients are wheat flour, water, almonds, salt, and yeast, that would be acceptable. Wheat flour, water, almonds, salt, and yeast. The next list would not be ingredients: flour, water, nuts, salt, and yeast. You can't just list the general term nuts. You have to list the exact nut. And then there's this, I included a statement in here that says about trade secrets. A lot of folks think that they've got a special ingredient and they don't want to put that on the ingredient label because it's proprietary and they think it makes all the difference. By law, it has to be listed on the ingredient statement unless you've gotten permission and have a letter from the FDA that says that the science is behind it, that doesn't cause anybody to have an adverse reaction, or it's not an allergen. And so you actually have to reach out to the Federal Drug Administration to do that. And then, am I required to send my products to a laboratory to obtain an official ingredient list? No, you don't have to. And here on the last slide is all of the links to the licensing documents on the Department of Agriculture's website. The quickest way to get to it is to go to www.agr.georgia.gov. Go to the Food Safety Division tab, go to the Retail Food tab, And then you'll, on the right-hand side of the page, you'll have your cottage food regulations and all of this, all the links that I've included here as well. And that is pretty much the presentation in a nutshell.
Okay, that was some good information. Thank you, Chris. Question for you, because I know you mentioned jellies and jams and preserves as one of the items that can be made and sold. Do those things have to go through the canning process?
No, not like a manufactured food process where they would have to be, you know, high pressurized and whatnot. You can can just like, you know, we grew up doing on the farm, using a pressure cooker or a water bath or whatnot. That's all legal.
Okay. Okay. And before we come to a complete end, I just wanted to leave our viewers with some suggested book titles that would perhaps inspire them to get started. And so we have The Pie Camp and Perfect Cakes. For those of you who may not have your grandma's secret recipe, you can always check these books out from our library. We also have the Ball Cannon Back to Basics, a foolproof guide to canning jam, jellies, and pickles and more. Again, also available at our library. The Encyclopedia of Herbs, Spices, and Flavoring, a Cook's Compendium. Okay. Also, the Sweet Book of Candy Making. So those are all available at the Clayton County Library System, or you can find any one of the books related to some of the items that Chris mentioned in the Pine system as well. And with that, Chris, thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you. You guys have a great day.
And you do the same.